The publication of these sources by the Irish Manuscripts Commission is very important for disseminating these much more widely.
These IMC publications are incredibly valuable because we're relying on the historian, the archivist and the genealogists who came before us, who've discovered these manuscripts and brought them forward for publication.
All of a sudden we have a body of big data for the 17th century that can really be exploited thanks to technology in ways that were just previously unimaginable. So the 1641 depositions are an incredible archive that came to Trinity College Dublin in 1741, 100 years after the rebellion of 1641 broke out. They comprise about 8,000 witness testimonies of what allegedly occurred in the aftermath of the outbreak of rebellion on the 22nd of October 1641. They're an extraordinary archive in that they give us the most incredible detail about the alleged massacres, ethnic cleansing, atrocity, mass killing, but also real insights to life in colonial Ireland. So as an archive, there are 31 volumes. They cover the entire country. In 2010, we published the transcriptions of the 1641 depositions online, and the Irish Manuscripts Commission, over the course of the past decade, has been publishing these volumes, beginning with Ulster, and 12 volumes will have appeared by the autumn of 2020. So the 1641 depositions are amongst the most controversial manuscripts in Irish history, and that's saying something. They're controversial because they record the massacres and the mass killing that accompanied the rising of 1641. But they also are an extraordinary archive because they provide these incredible insights to life in colonial Ireland. They're controversial as well because they are really the voices of the Protestant settler community. Irish Catholics who experienced comparable atrocity and violence at the hands of state-funded soldiers sadly didn't have an opportunity to record the violence that was deployed against them. So they are one-sided, and that makes them controversial, but they are nonetheless a hugely important and significant body of historical material. The depositions can be used at many levels. Obviously, the scholar is hugely interested in them, in what they tell us about 17th century Ireland. But the genealogist is fascinated by them because of the thousands and thousands of place names, but also the names of people who were victims, people who were assailants, and the continuity, particularly of place names, makes them extremely important because we don't have any statistical information for the mid-17th century. So the depositions are extremely significant, especially when they are consulted alongside William Petty's Down Survey, but also the Books of Survey and Distribution, which I'm delighted that the Irish Manuscripts Commission is also publishing. So all of a sudden we have a body of big data for the 17th century that can really be exploited thanks to technology in ways that were just previously unimaginable. So I actually think the full potential of the depositions remains to be fully realised.
The Limerick House of Industry was established in 1774 as a result of an act of the Irish Parliament in 1772-3, which allowed for the creation of a poor law system, a system of poor relief, which provided for the building of a number of institutions around the country. Limerick was the very first, and overall about 7 were built to join some that were already existing in Dublin and Cork. The Register of the House of Industry is a register of inmates who were admitted into this workhouse between the 1770s and the 1790s. And it's a very rare survival. This source is very important for historians, particularly historians of of ordinary people, shall we use that phrase, the people who rarely get attention. Because for the most part, these people can't write. They rarely leave records behind them. And so any glimpse at all for these people at this time in the 18th century is very rare. We don't know their names. We don't know their conditions in general. There's very few census records available for these people. So this particular register tells us a great deal about individuals, and unfortunately individuals who have fallen on hard times. The very poor in society, those people who, for whatever reason, are not able to work, who may have been considered miscreant and who were obliged to come into this institution. You can approach this register to write any number of different types of histories. I think it is most useful for trying to figure out how societies, and particularly obviously Limerick, but this relates to other urban cities as well, how these places and how societies dealt with, as they saw it, this growing problem of poverty. And many institutions are established in the late 18th century, in the second half of the 18th century, to deal with this so-called problem. But we know very little of how the institutions actually worked, what policies they adopted. And so this source is ideal for trying to figure out, well, how long did people stay in these institutions? What type of services were available to them? The publication of these sources by the Irish Manuscripts Commission is very important for disseminating these much more widely. I mean, yes, you could go to Limerick City and see the original source, but by making available this source in this format makes it much more accessible, much more readable, and they're much easier to use.
There's lots of material throughout many of the IMC publications that are useful for genealogical research. One of the IMC publications that I would dip into quite regularly is the Registry of Deeds Dublin Abstract of Wills. So this was compiled through a great deal of painstaking work, and I think that's what's really important to recognise as well, is that the work of the editors and the people who've drawn together these sets of records is truly phenomenal, and have created something that's very, very time-saving for the researcher, because of the way that they've organised and particularly indexed the records. So the Registry of Deeds, it was established in 1708 as a repository for memorials that document transactions relating to property. So this can include leases, mortgages, sales, conveyances, marriage settlements, but also wills, where property is bequeathed from one generation to the next. What's really important about this is that, again, another huge loss in the 1922 Public Record Office fire was the destruction of the testamentary records, wills and ministrations that were held in the Public Record Office. And testamentary records, again, are a hugely valuable genealogical tool because they can often refer to the spouses, siblings, children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren of a deceased person. Equally referring to the extent of the property that they held at the time of their death, the value of their estate, their occupation, where they lived. Can be a vast amount of information in these documents. So again, this acts as a sort of a substitute for what was destroyed. And there's great material in here. And so I would describe a genealogist sometimes as a bit of a magpie. We tend to fly in, spot the nice shiny reference that we're looking for and fly right back out again. And so that's where the value is here, rather than having to sit in an archive or even reach that archive. So for many people, a manuscript is in one location that they may not be able to get to. And even if they can, you sit down and it may take hours or even days to work your way through the material to find anything of relevance. If you can pick up an indexed volume, you've 5-10 minutes to investigate before you can discover whether something that's relevant to you is found within it. Not always the case, but certainly across most of these publications, you'll be able to dip in, check for a name, and move on if you don't find what you're looking for, or dig a little bit deeper. So while I have these hard copy editions in front of me here, Many of the out-of-print editions are available as digital editions for free on the IMC website. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can sit down and start working through this material. And this collection of digital editions is constantly being added to, so it's always worthwhile coming back to see what's been added.